$440 million. Take a moment to let that number settle in your mind. It is not the GDP of a small island nation, nor is it the valuation of a tech startup in Silicon Valley. It is the raw, unadulterated prize pool that FIFA allocated for a single month of football. When 22 men step onto a perfectly manicured grass pitch under the blinding floodlights of a World Cup stadium, we see a battle of national pride, pure emotion, and tactical genius. We see tears during national anthems and desperate tackles in the 94th minute. But behind that beautiful theatre of human drama lies a cold, hyper-calculated corporate spreadsheet where every single second on the pitch is assigned a precise financial value. We are told that players perform for the shirt, that they are driven entirely by the immortal glory of lifting that solid gold trophy. But how much do World Cup players really get paid? How is it even possible that some athletes make more money in a single 4-week tournament than an average worker earns in a lifetime, while others are flying home with barely enough to cover their insurance policies? To unlock the secret economy of international football, we have to look past the superficial headlines and dive straight into the deep administrative machinery of the global game. The numbers are staggering, but they are also deeply deceptive. If you look closely at the data models, you will discover that a world-class superstar from France, Brazil, or England operates under a completely different financial gravity than a mid-table domestic defender playing for a lower-ranked nation. The contrast is not just wide, it is an absolute canyon. For the elite, the World Cup is a high-yield marketing laboratory where personal brands are amplified to a global audience of 3.5 billion viewers, turning social media impressions into lucrative sponsorship contract extensions before the group stage is even finalized. But for the unheralded squads, the tournament is an intense, high-stakes job interview where a single error on the ball can destroy their future market value, while a single clean sheet can multiply their domestic earning power by 500%. The traditional giants of the soft drink and sportswear industries, the massive corporate entities like Coca-Cola, Nike, and Pepsi, spend years planning their marketing strategies around these 28 days of tournament football. They are not just buying billboard space, they are investing in what marketing executives call story performing, embedding their brands so deeply into the emotional peaks of the tournament that you cannot think of a historic goal without visualizing the logo stamped across the player's chest. It is a highly integrated commercial network where a single microsecond of broadcast footage can trigger viral communication effects worth millions of dollars in direct retail sales. But how does that massive wave of commercial capital actually trickle down into the bank accounts of the human beings executing the tactical playbooks on the grass? Who controls the hidden cash flows that dictate the financial hierarchy of an international locker room? The answers hide within a highly complex, multi-layered payout structure that is systematically guarded by international federations and sports law executives. When we open the sealed archives of international football finances, we find a mechanical reality that breaks every romantic cliché we have been taught to believe about the sport. It is a world where tax structures, corporate private equity, and automated performance triggers collide to dictate the exact value of an international player's sweat. But the initial layer of this financial anatomy is not the multi-million-dollar bonuses paid after a final match. It is a hidden, baseline daily fee that starts accumulating the exact second an athlete reports to training camp, a number that proves even the road to the tournament is paved with gold. When an elite player enters the training fortress of his national team, the first financial tier that activates is not the massive performance bonus broadcasted by international networks. It is a highly structural, silent daily stipend known to corporate sports lawyers as the camp allowance. As documented in the business archives of channels like Athletic Interest, the baseline economy of international football begins with an institutional fee designed to cover the basic operational risk of an elite asset being away from his club employer. For a world-class finisher, reporting to duty means stepping away from a highly controlled domestic ecosystem where their commercial value is continuously protected. To compensate for this transition, national federations establish a mechanical daily payout structure that ranges from a modest $200 per day for emerging footballing territories to an aggressive $3,500 a day for the ultra-elite squads of Western Europe. This baseline flow of capital accumulates silently over the course of a 4-week pre-tournament camp, serving as a functional retainer before the first ball is even kicked under the stadium floodlights. But this daily retainer is completely eclipsed by the complex legal layer of match appearance fees. Every single time a player pulls that national shirt over his chest and steps onto the grass for a group stage fixture, a specific automated trigger fires within the federation's bank accounts. For a traditional powerhouse like France or Germany, a starting player is legally guaranteed a flat rate of roughly €22,000 per match, regardless of the tactical outcome on the pitch. If the manager executes a sub-second tactical adjustment in the 75th minute, introducing a young substitute to stabilize the defensive line, that teenager instantly triggers a structured tier of that payout, earning a legal right to a 50% allocation of the baseline match fee. It is a calculated, industrial process where every minute of physical cardiovascular exertion is tracked by biometric chips and translated directly into a legal invoice. The financial complexity thickens when we analyze how these federations secure the capital to fund these initial layers. This is where the structural blueprints of corporate sports entities like Red Bull showcase how sport operates entirely as a high-margin business, relying on a fully integrated media and entertainment value chain to generate upstream cash reserves. FIFA does not merely distribute its $440 million prize pool at the end of the tournament. It issues immediate, structural preparation grants of $1.5 million to every single one of the 48 participating nations months before the opening ceremony. This upfront cash injection allows smaller federations to cover the massive logistical bills of luxury hotel buyouts, chartered international flights, and specialized sports science medical infrastructure. The global governing body essentially provides the liquid capital to ensure that the tournament functions with automated, mechanical precision, treating the national teams as high-performing franchisees in a global entertainment network. Yet, this institutional preparation capital is instantly drained if a federation's administrative department suffers from internal corruption or structural mismanagement. While the elite Western nations operate under tight, corporate accounting controls where every payout lane is cleared by auditing executives, lower-ranked countries often find themselves trapped in a state of absolute financial chaos. Historically, tournaments have been deeply disrupted by players launching high-stakes training ground rebellions, refusing to exit their hotel rooms or step onto the practice pitch until their domestic federation produces physical suitcases of cash to fulfill unpaid camp stipends. The contrast between the sterile, automated banking wires of European football and the desperate, cash-driven survival mechanics of underfunded squads exposes the first deep fracture in the international game. This internal instability becomes a critical threat to a team's competitive longevity because the baseline daily fee and match appearance structures are merely the structural foundation of a skyscraper whose higher floors are built on high yield, aggressive progression bonuses that increase exponentially with every single knockout round a squad manages to survive. As a national team advances deep into the knockout brackets, the baseline economy of international football undergoes a violent, exponential mutation. The payout structure shifts away from routine match appearance fees and activates what corporate sports lawyers call progression tiers. Within these hidden financial layers, the governing bodies of world football do not merely award static cash prizes. They operate a high-stakes corporate tournament matrix where every victory multiplies a federation's upstream revenue. In the group stages of a 48-team tournament, a single draw or a narrow victory yields a functional baseline distribution. But the exact millisecond a squad secures a spot in the round of 32, the administrative spreadsheet triggers a massive capital injection, automatically adding an estimated $9 million to the federation's running balance sheet. This creates an intense, compounding pressure within the locker room, transforming sub-second physical actions on the grass into high-yield financial transactions. To understand the intense financial gravity of this phase, one must look at how elite federations structure their internal player bonus agreements long before the opening ceremony. In traditional footballing powerhouses like England, Brazil, or France, the national players do not receive standard club-level weekly salaries while representing their country. Instead, they're legal representation bargains for aggressive, success-contingent payout structures. If a squad suffers a tactical collapse and is bundled out in the early knockout phases, the players leave the camp with nothing but their baseline daily retainers. But if they survive the physical friction of the tournament, progressing step by step through the round of 16 and into the quarterfinals, the bonus matrix escalates dynamically. For a top-tier European nation, Reaching the semifinals activates personal performance bonuses that can reach up to $350,000 per player, an automated reward for driving the federation's brand into the peak viewership windows of global broadcasting. This compounding progression format mirrors the complex financial architecture implemented by sports-centered multinational conglomerates like Red Bull, where short-term tactical success on the pitch is systematically leveraged to maximize downstream market valuation. In the integrated Red Bull ecosystem, a player's progression through smaller leagues like the Austrian Bundesliga is calculated to prepare them for the financial and competitive intensity of the UEFA Champions League, turning human talent into a highly diversified, corporate private equity asset. FIFA utilizes an identical economic blueprint during the World Cup, treating the progression of national squads as a mechanism to amplify the commercial value of their television rights and corporate stadium partnerships. The further an unheralded squad advances, the more expensive their commercial placement becomes, turning the tournament into an absolute multi-billion-dollar marketing laboratory where human sweat generates massive upstream capital. Yet, this massive wave of progression revenue creates a profound psychological canyon within underfunded squads that do not possess corporate accounting controls. While an elite European player might casually donate their entire international match earnings to local charities, knowing their financial future is entirely secured by multi-million-pound club contracts, the athletes representing lower-ranked nations look at these progression milestones as a desperate, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to achieve complete financial survival. When an underdog nation shocks a traditional giant to reach the quarterfinals, the sudden influx of millions of dollars in FIFA prize money triggers an immediate, high-stakes battle over the percentage breakdown of the payout. The players know that the administration has historically pocketed these multi-million-dollar grants, leaving the athletes who executed the playbook on the grass completely abandoned when the global spotlight moves elsewhere. This structural disparity turns the transition from the quarterfinals to the absolute summit of the tournament into a psychological powder keg, a world where the physical cost of pursuing the ultimate Podio prize is systematically weighed against the brutal corporate realities of personal market value and career-threatening injuries. When a national team completely clears the physical hurdle of the quarterfinals, ascending into the ultra-elite zone of the Podio, the distribution of financial reward triggers the ultimate structural tier of the tournament, the final podium bonuses. Within this highly restrictive economic space, the numbers processed by FIFA's administrative database undergo a massive, historic escalation. The difference between finishing as a semi-finalist and standing on the absolute summit of the global game is not merely measured in historical prestige. It is quantified by a violent influx of fresh, upstream capital. For the squad that manages to navigate the final 90 minutes on the pitch, lifting that solid gold trophy into the night sky, the global governing body allocates an absolute, staggering payout of $42 million directly to their national federation. The second-place runners-up receive a heavy consolation prize of $30 million, while the third and fourth-place squads split a combined layer of $54 million. It is an immense, hyper-moneized corporate pyramid where the physical exertion of 22 men on the grass creates a massive financial waterfall that forces federations to re-evaluate their entire internal accounting infrastructure. To fully understand the deep internal friction generated by these astronomical figures, one must examine the secret percentage allocation agreements hammered out between the players' legal representation and the federation executives long before the opening ceremony. In elite Western European environments like the German DFB or the English FA, these negotiations are handled with clinical, corporate precision. The players do not look at the World Cup as a mechanism to fund their daily lives, as their personal bank accounts are already heavily saturated by multi-million-pound club contracts across the prominent domestic leagues. Instead, their legal teams build highly automated, success-contingent formulas where up to 40% of the total FIFA prize money is systematically funneled directly into a shared player pool, creating a mechanical relationship where collective progression matches personal financial inflation. For these athletes, the Podio bonus represents a lucrative commercial dividend, a high-yield return on their physical performance that can reach up to $550,000 per individual if they capture the ultimate prize. This corporate distribution structure perfectly aligns with the advanced private equity models utilized by contemporary sports conglomerates like Red Bull, where on-pitch performance triggers are systematically integrated into long-term commercial valuation spreadsheets. In the tightly unified Red Bull network, A football club does not operate as an isolated competitive entity. It functions as a functional developmental gear within a massive, cross-continental entertainment and media machine. The capital generated by talent development in lesser leagues is continuously reinvested into upstream franchises like RB Leipzig or the New York Red Bulls, turning every physical goal and successful transition into a predictable, multi-layered revenue stream. FIFA applies this identical corporate logic to the pinnacle of international football, treating the final match of the World Cup not merely as a historic sporting event, but as a hyper-valuable media property where global broadcast rights, stadium branding partnerships, and automated ticket sales generate an elite commercial platform that justifies those massive $42 million checks. Yet, when this massive wave of Podio capital is funneled into a territory that does not possess these clinical, corporate accounting controls, the percentage allocation model collapses into a state of absolute administrative war. For players representing underfunded, lower-ranked nations, those massive progression bonuses are not an unglamorous line item to be casually donated to local charities. They represent a historic, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to achieve absolute financial survival and protect their families from generational poverty. When an unheralded underdog squad executes a perfect tactical press, defying every predictive data model to secure a historic third-place finish, the sudden availability of $27 million in prize money triggers an immediate, hostile confrontation within the Federation's executive suites. The athletes know with absolute certainty that if they do not demand their payouts upfront, the administrative directors will systematically absorb the capital into hidden Federation accounts, leaving the human beings who bled on the grass completely empty-handed. This structural disparity turns the final distribution of tournament wealth into a psychological minefield, creating an intense, unspoken tension that splits the international locker room down the absolute core of its financial gravity. When we peel back the next layer of the World Cup economy, we leave behind the public structure of FIFA grants and enter the highly confidential world of individual commercial guarantees and image rights. As documented in the business studies of channels like Athletic Interest, the true financial anatomy of an elite player during a 28-day tournament is not dictated by what their national federation pays them, but by the complex, multi-layered endorsement contracts they sign with global sportswear monopolies. When a world-class athlete steps onto the pitch, his feet are literally functioning as highly valuable commercial billboards. Brands like Nike, Adidas, and Puma spend years planning their marketing strategies around these specific microseconds of broadcast exposure, constructing advanced predictive spreadsheets to determine which rising icons will anchor their global digital campaigns for the next 5-year cycle. To understand how this corporate machinery manipulates an athlete's financial reality, one must look at the brutal precision of contemporary sportswear contract clauses. An elite forward does not simply receive a static annual sum to wear a specific boot. Their compensation is built on a mechanical grid of automated performance triggers. Capturing a golden boot, executing a decisive assist in a quarterfinal match, or simply maintaining a high tracking velocity on television screens triggers massive, retroactive payout escalations. Conversely, suffering an early group stage elimination or being dropping to the substitutes bench due to a sudden tactical realignment can activate severe penalty clauses, automatically slicing a player's marketing revenue by up to 60%. It is an intense, high-stakes corporate laboratory where a single heavy touch on the ball can instantly delete millions of dollars in projected retail sales. This aggressive commercial optimization is why the world's most prominent brands completely reconfigured their long-term sponsorship matrices when a historic icon like Neymar chose to violently shock the footballing universe. In September 2020, the Brazilian superstar abruptly terminated his legendary 15-year partnership with Nike, a corporate relationship that had commenced when he was an unheralded 13-year-old child, to sign a record-breaking contract with Puma. The structural mechanics behind that divorce were completely driven by financial gravity and personal brand real estate. Neymar was no longer willing to operate under the marketing shadow of older icons like Cristiano Ronaldo within Nike's corporate spreadsheet. He demanded to be the absolute center of a global sports business value chain. Puma, recognizing the massive storytelling potential of embedding their brand into his performance, met his astronomical financial demands, building a fully integrated media machine entirely around his feet. The clinical reality of these corporate sponsorship strategies was highlighted during the global pandemic. an operational crisis that forced soft drink giants and material manufacturers to aggressively slash their marketing budgets and re-evaluate the actual value of their talent assets. While traditional soft drink powerhouses like Red Bull successfully diversified their downstream risk by acquiring 5 professional football clubs and integrated media production houses to control the absolute rights to their sports performing content, traditional sportswear manufacturers like Nike made the strategic calculation to let established, high-earning veterans walk away to competitor brands. They systematically audited their sales data models, discovering that older superstars no longer generated a positive return on investment compared to the explosive digital capital of the incoming generation. They chose to save millions of dollars by letting icons like Robert Lewandowski and Raheem Sterling explore alternative partnerships, completely shifting their financial focus to long-term bets on the future like Erling Haaland and Kylian Mbappé. This cold corporate calculation turns the international dressing room into a space of intense personal tension, where a player's performance for his national flag is continuously evaluated against the real-time financial trajectory of his private commercial portfolio. When we move beyond the hyper-moneized boardrooms of Western Europe and analyze the corporate distribution networks of the global game, the anatomy of World Cup payouts shifts from basic retainer daily fees into a complex web of commercial bonuses managed by multinational lifestyle conglomerates. As highlighted in the marketing strategies of channels like Athletic Interest, the total economic footprint of an international football player during a 28-day tournament is heavily anchored by localized performance metrics and brand real estate on social media pipelines. While the global audience is completely transfixed by the physical geometry of a 90-minute tactical battle on the pitch, a parallel universe of private equity partners, global apparel distributors, and luxury watch manufacturers are executing real-time data calculations to measure the exact return on investment generated by every single player touch on the ball. To fully comprehend the deep commercial mechanics operating behind the scenes, one must trace the massive capital flows that cross international borders through automated banking systems. For an elite athlete who has achieved the status of a global brand asset, the World Cup is a commercial accelerator that completely overrides their standard domestic club earning structures. Every goal celebrated under the stadium screens acts as a high-yield trigger, automatically activating multi-million-dollar retroactive bonus payouts embedded within their long-term corporate endorsement contracts. These contracts are built on a rigid mathematical grid where visibility, team progression, and personal metric spikes are directly translated into financial liquidity, transforming an elite athlete into a highly diversified revenue machine where personal equity inflates exponentially with every single clean sheet or decisive pass into the final third. This hyper-calculated financial framework explains why the world's most aggressive luxury distributors entirely restructured their corporate sponsorship matrices when an international icon like Neymar violently severed his historical ties with the world's largest materials provider. In September 2020, the Brazilian superstar executed a radical commercial pivot, permanently walking away from his 15-year partnership with Nike, a deeply integrated relationship that had legally commenced when he was a 13-year-old child navigating youth academy fields, to sign a record-breaking endorsement guarantee with Puma. The institutional parameters behind that massive corporate divorce were entirely driven by capital accumulation and personal marketing territory. Neymar refused to allow his brand equity to remain confined behind historical icons like Cristiano Ronaldo on Nike's corporate spreadsheets, demanding an exclusive, integrated marketing value chain where his individual image would dictate the absolute center of a global sports business ecosystem. The cold precision of these corporate investments was laid completely bare during the recent global operational crisis, a systemic shock that forced traditional materials manufacturers to drastically reduce their marketing budgets and execute a cold culling of their aging talent rosters. While multinational entertainment models like Red Bull protected their upstream capital by acquiring 5 independent football franchises and controlling the complete distribution rights to their multimedia content, traditional apparel brands like Nike made the clinical calculation to allow high-earning veterans to walk straight to their commercial competitors. Their internal data models revealed that older super stewards no longer generated a positive return on investment compared to the explosive digital capital of incoming prospects, prompting them to save millions of dollars by letting Robert Lewandowski and Raheem Sterling walk away, while consolidating their liquid capital for high-yield bets on the future like Erling Haaland and Kylian Mbappé. This systemic reorganization of tournament wealth has completely fractured the traditional locker room along deep economic lines, separating the ultra-elite brand icons from the unheralded domestic defenders who are fighting for their basic financial survival on the pitch. When we transition away from the structural baseline payouts and the highly optimized commercial networks of sportswear monopolies, the economic architecture of international football forces us to confront a far more extreme reality, the canyon of absolute financial contrast. This is where the beautiful game stops behaving like a uniform global sport and splits into a hyperpolarized business landscape where geography, domestic infrastructure, and political gravity dictate a player's exact value. On one side of this canyon sit the traditional powerhouses of Western Europe and South America, operating under the structural protection of multimillion-dollar banking wires and deep commercial reserves. On the absolute opposite side sit the unheralded squads from emerging footballing territories, athletes who arrive at the tournament not to accumulate luxury asset portfolios, but to salvage the basic economic future of their local communities. It is a world where the financial contrast is so violent it systematically alters the psychological motivation of the human beings stepping onto the grass. To understand how deep this structural division runs, we must examine the internal wealth disparity separating the top earners from the bottom line items on the global spreadsheet. An elite superstar representing France, England, or Brazil enters the tournament with their personal financial security completely guaranteed by multi-million euro domestic club contracts. For these brand icons, the World Cup is a commercial booster, a high-yield laboratory designed to multiply their social media capital, escalate their personal equity, and secure massive new endorsement cycles with global corporate cartels. They casually waive their daily training stipends or redirect their match appearance fees directly to metropolitan charities, knowing that an international medal represents an immortal legacy asset rather than a survival mechanism. Their reality operates under an entirely different economic gravity, insulated from the financial anxiety that continuously fractures the focus of less prominent national camps. Conversely, for the unheralded squads representing lower-ranked nations across Africa, Asia, or Central America, the tournament represents a high-stakes, once-in-a-lifetime career interview. Many of these domestic defenders and mid-tier midfielders grind out an existence in underfunded local leagues where the annual salary model matches what an elite Premier League star earns in less than 12 hours. For these athletes, the progression grants and performance bonuses allocated by FIFA do not represent pocket change. They are life-altering sums of capital capable of permanently lifting entire extended families out of systemic economic vulnerability. The pressure this reality applies to every single touch on the ball is immense and deeply emotional. A missed clearance or a microsecond delay in transition doesn't just damage a tactical scheme. It can completely erase a player's projected market value and cost them a life-changing international transfer. This extreme polarization transforms the tournament into a continuous, subterranean war over wealth distribution, turning the weeks leading up to the opening ceremony into a minefield of labor disputes and training ground rebellions. Historically, underfunded squads have frequently reached a state of absolute administrative exhaustion, actively refusing to step onto chartered team flights or participate in mandatory promotional events until their domestic federations provide physical, upfront guarantees for their unpaid allowances. While European directors manage their operations through clinical corporate accounting models, alternative setups are forced into chaotic survival mechanics, with players demanding actual cash payments wrapped in suitcases because they completely look past the promises of their own executive boards. The contrast between the sterile, automated wires of Western capital and the frantic, cash-driven friction of emerging federations exposes the deep corporate divide hiding beneath the romantic mask of international competition. This internal economic warfare creates an unstable competitive framework where the true cost of an athlete's performance is systematically weighed against the institutional instability of their federation, an operation where the ultimate penalty for administrative failure is not a lost match, but the total erasure of a nation's sporting future. When we examine the deep structural breakdown of international tournament wealth, the polarization moves away from clothing sponsorships and enters the highly volatile ecosystem of direct government bonuses and state-mandated asset transfers. As documented across the industrial analysis files of Athletic Interest, The contrast between Western Europe and emerging economies reaches a point of absolute friction when a nation's political regime decides to manipulate a tactical podio achievement for domestic geopolitical capital. For elite squads operating within developed banking networks, a state bonus is an obsolete administrative detail. The players often negotiate for their public federations to route any government checks directly into national health systems or community development funds, as their personal liquidity is already heavily saturated by automated club-level capital flows. But when a lower-ranked squad executes a historic rebellion on the grass, defying every spreadsheet data model to advance past the group stage, the political gravity of their home territory takes total control of the financial narrative. In multiple historic instances across West Africa and the Middle East, a country's supreme political leadership has chosen to intervene directly in the squad's payout structure, bypassing traditional banking channels to issue direct, state-funded performance retainers. Following a historic knockout victory, players have been summoned directly to presidential palaces to receive physical envelopes filled with cash, real estate deeds for state-protected land, or lifetime tax exemptions that are completely decoupled from FIFA's standardized prize pool guidelines. To an external corporate auditor, this fluid injection of capital looks like a deep violation of standardized institutional governance. But to a domestic striker who spent his youth grinding out an existence on unwatered local pitches, this sudden political evaluation represents the absolute pinnacle of their personal financial architecture, a rapid, chaotic accumulation of wealth that can permanently secure the physical survival of an entire community. Conversely, this hypercentralized state dependency creates an intense, terrifying level of psychological anxiety that completely reshapes an athlete's physiological mechanics on the pitch. When a government assumes direct financial responsibility for a squad's progression, the line item for failure becomes an absolute national emergency. If a player suffers a neuromuscular delay in the 88th minute, executing a loose back pass that triggers an immediate opposing goal, they are not merely risking a drop in their analytical performance index. They're facing the immediate threat of state-enforced asset seizures, public condemnation from the Ministry of Sport, or the permanent cancellation of their family's domestic travel documentation. The pressure moving through the international locker room becomes toxic and dense, completely suffocating the unburdened creative freedom that traditional football purists romance about. This deep architectural chasm between the risk-free, highly corporate modeling of Western teams and the high-stakes, politically volatile survival of underdog nations completely shatters the illusion that all athletes are competing for the identical sporting prize. While one midfielder looks at a quarterfinal fixture as a functional mechanism to test and slot's defensive pressing schemes, his direct physical opponent looks at that exact same 90-minute window as a literal battle to escape systemic underdevelopment and secure diplomatic safety. The structural contrast hiding within the archives of the global game proves that every decimal point of wealth distributed by international cartels carries a completely different emotional weight depending on the geographical coordinate where the bank wire lands. And as the tournament moves out of the quarterfinal bracket, entering the hypercritical window where the final four squads prepare for the blinding spotlight of the semifinals, this economic polarization activates a hidden layer of corporate exploitation that leaves the bottom 50% of the tournament roster completely stranded in total obscurity. When we assemble these contrasting layers of wealth, the sterile, automated millions of Western brand partnerships and the frantic, cash-driven survival mechanics of underfunded federations, the secret ledger of international football reveals a much deeper, structural truth about the modern game. The World Cup is no longer merely a sporting tournament where 22 human beings chase a leather ball for national pride. It has evolved into a hyper-moneized corporate casino where the physical performance of an athlete is systematically managed like a high-yield financial portfolio. Elite teams no longer just draft tactical playbooks. They operate complex spreadsheets where player age, corporate resale value, state tax structures, and international tournament availability are factored into clinical algorithms to determine a human asset's exact commercial viability. The sport has shifted away from intuitive scouting romance, transforming the international locker room into a clinical laboratory where technical production must continuously justify the massive financial weight of multi-million-dollar contracts. This hyper-calculated architecture explains why Europe's traditional elite completely reconfigured their long-term developmental plans when the global market underwent a violent update. The contemporary transfer market functions under a rigid spreadsheet gravity where top-tier clubs are constantly looking for optimized value, frequently abandoning proven, high-earning superstars to secure younger, less expensive alternatives who fit into their automated financial algorithms. We see legendary finishers who fired domestic titles or torched dominant leagues forced into sudden, temporary exiles because their wage bills, image rights percentages, and international obligations made them a red-line statistical risk on a corporate balance sheet. The elite clubs have convinced themselves that they can bypass the unpredictable human variable by managing sports entirely as a predictable business, relying on a fully integrated media and entertainment value chain to control the rights to their athlete stories while insulating their upstream capital from on-pitch volatility. Yet, this cold industrial dominance creates a profound existential trap for the players who are caught within its operational machinery. While an elite brand icon can navigate this system with total financial security, protected by multi-million euro endorsements and insulated from domestic anxiety, the unheralded performers are treated as highly volatile, depreciating line items. The immense pressure generated by this continuous surveillance systematically erodes the creative freedom that traditional football purists romance about, turning every 90-minute window into a high-stakes corporate evaluation. If a player executes a loose back pass or suffers a neuromuscular delay under the blinding stadium floodlights, the predictive data models will automatically adjust their real-time market value, impacting their potential for international transfers and threatening the economic safety of their local communities. The game has not truly changed, but the corporate spreadsheets surrounding it have reached a level of absolute dominance where a player's sweat is measured exclusively by its capacity to generate upstream wealth. This total commodification of human talent is forcing elite performers to seek radical, subterranean mechanisms to survive the intense physical and psychological toll of this multi-billion-dollar entertainment complex. As the corporate landscape demands continuous high-velocity performance across multiple fronts, the quiet reality of the international dressing room is breaking past traditional cliched boundaries. Behind the tightly guarded fortresses of professional sports science training facilities, a massive silent majority of elite athletes are quietly utilizing alternative, controversial substances to manage chronic neuromuscular exhaustion, acute personal pain, and severe performance anxiety. The multi-billion-dollar cartels are fully aware of this hidden internal market, and as global legislation continues to shift alongside public perception, the executive boardrooms are preparing to execute a massive commercial pivot. They are moving to transition their traditional alcohol endorsement networks into highly lucrative lifestyle supplement channels, preparing to claim that these identical plant-based products will magically amplify your athletic performance the exact second the corporate sponsorship documents are officially countersigned. The corporate directors are no longer merely staging a tournament. They are optimizing a global entertainment grid where the line between a historic national triumph and a high-margin marketing window has been permanently erased from the ledger. When you audit the complete financial ledger of international sports entertainment, stripping away the multi-million-dollar banking wires and the hyper-curated marketing campaigns, you are left confronting an essential truth that no spreadsheet algorithm can ever fully quantify. The World Cup is a high-velocity business powerhouse, a platform where 48 nations are systematically formatted into corporate revenue engines to satisfy global broadcast monopolies and international equity partners. But for the human assets executing the tactical playbooks on the grass, the true return on investment is not measured exclusively by the daily training retainers or the podio progression bonuses distributed by executive committees. They discover that the summit of financial and athletic achievement is an intensely isolating environment, a space where personal security is continuously balanced against career-threatening injury risks and immediate public anatomy by the global media machine. Every fourth year, the global game creates modern myths of wealth and glory, but the grueling industrial years in between are where real life takes its toll on these modern gladiators. The deep chasm separating the risk-free, optimized brand portfolios of Western Europe from the high-stakes, politically volatile survival struggles of lower-ranked federations proves that a dollar wire carries a completely distinct emotional weight depending on the geographical coordinates of the locker room. For one player, a 90-minute appearance under the blinding floodlights is a clinical corporate workout. For his physical opponent, it is a literal battle to lift an entire domestic community out of systemic underdevelopment and achieve generational safety. This is the hidden economy that the 5-minute highlight reels systematically erase from the collective history of the sport, a world where the physical cost of excellence is paid in raw human stress long before the first retail sales figures are calculated by soft drink and sportswear cartels. Traditional football purists will continue to romance about the unburdened beauty of international competition, but the closed-door archives reveal an industry that has permanently prioritized upstream capital optimization over the emotional stability of its human performers. If you want to look past the sterile statistics and truly understand the brutal corporate machinery operating behind the beautiful game, if you want to deselect the polished broadcast optics and dive deep into the hidden finance tracks, the boardroom betrayals, and the structural collapses that define the destinies of your favorite icons, make sure to smash that like button right away, subscribe to the channel, and engage in the comments section below. Turn on your post notifications so you never miss an execution of our deep investigative files, because the vault of international sports business is saturated with thousands of untold stories waiting to be unsealed. Every legend has a story the highlights never show, a hidden trajectory where corporate private equity, political dependency, and clinical data models collide to dictate the absolute value of human sweat on the grass. We are here to tell those stories the exact way they deserve to be told, with the context, the drama, and the clinical financial details that mainstream sports networks systematically skip. The microeconomic infrastructure powering the contemporary sports world proves that these multi-billion-dollar tournaments no longer function under traditional athletic paradigms. They have inverted the value chain entirely, transforming the physical body of the international footballer into a highly optimized branding vehicle. The corporate entity does not merely buy human capital to execute a localized pressing scheme on the grass. Instead, they build fully integrated entertainment ecosystems where the athlete's public visibility, historical progression, and private physical choices are systematically aggregated into a singular commercial asset portfolio. This calculated formatting is explicitly visible when we analyze how the elite soft drink and sports apparel cartels design their success contingent payout structures, calculating the exact return on investment for every social media metric spike generated during a live broadcast window. To fully comprehend the deep corporate complexity operating within this international theater, one must trace the massive cash flows that travel through international banking pipelines during a high-stakes transfer cycle. When a world-class finisher fires 37 goals in 41 matches, secures a domestic double, and captures the Golden Boot, standard sporting logic dictates that his market equity should inflate exponentially. You expect the primary sporting directors of the Premier League to engage in an aggressive, unregulated bidding war to secure his registration. But the modern spreadsheet reality has mutated into something far more cold and data-driven. Elite club executives no longer evaluate human talent on pure qualitative skill. They pass individual player metrics through rigid financial algorithms where age, resale value, local tax laws, and international tournament availability are calculated to determine if a multi-million euro transaction makes mathematical sense on a balance sheet. This cold corporate calculation explains why traditional European heavyweights completely abandoned their pursuits of prime international finishers last summer, choosing to let established world-class superstars stay in tactical isolation while scrambling to sign younger alternatives who didn't possess half their physical track record. Real Madrid committed astronomical financial reserves to secure their long-term French brand icon, completely saturating their wage bill and restructuring their central core. Simultaneously, Chelsea presented contract terms that offered €4 million in base wages and €4 million in performance bonuses, less than half of what the asset was earning in Italy. The elite clubs systematically audited the data models, concluding that a player's mandatory absence during a winter international campaign, combined with high image rights valuations, made them a red-line statistical liability. They chose to protect their upstream capital, leaving one of the most clinical strikers on earth stranded in a temporary Turkish exile, while the corporate machine reconfigured the financial boundaries of the sport. Yet, this total commodification of human performance is forcing elite players to seek radical, subterranean mechanisms to survive the intense physical and psychological toll of this multi-billion-dollar entertainment complex. As the corporate landscape demands continuous high-velocity production across multiple fronts, the quiet reality of the international dressing room is breaking past traditional societal cliches. Behind the tightly guarded fortresses of elite sports science training facilities, a massive silent majority of elite performers are quietly turning to alternative, controversial substances like cannabis to manage chronic physical exhaustion, acute personal pain, and severe performance anxiety. The professional leagues are fully aware of this hidden internal market, and as global legislation continues to shift alongside public perception, the executive boardrooms are preparing to execute a massive commercial pivot. They are moving to transition their traditional alcohol endorsement networks into highly lucrative lifestyle supplement channels, preparing to claim that these identical plant-based products will magically amplify your athletic velocity the exact second the corporate sponsorship documents are officially countersigned. The corporate directors are no longer merely staging a tournament. They are optimizing a global entertainment grid where the line between a historic national triumph and a high-margin marketing window has been permanently erased from the ledger. When we take a step back and examine the global spreadsheet of this beautiful game, we realize that the true cost of a World Cup performance can never be fully quantified by international bank wires or clothing sponsorships. The modern tournament operates as a hyper-moneized corporate machine, where human sweat is systematically converted into upstream capital to satisfy media monopolies and private equity partners. For 28 days under the blinding stadium floodlights, we witness a theater of national pride and raw human emotion. But behind the velvet curtains of the executive suites, elite managers and legal teams are continuously adjusting their mathematical equations, treating the players not as national heroes, but as volatile financial assets subjected to high-yield risk assessments. The real tragedy of modern international football is that long after the final match concludes and the solid gold trophy is locked away, the corporate machinery simply moves on to the next young brand icon, leaving generations of unheralded defenders trapped in absolute obscurity. Yet, for the true purists who live and bleed for this sport, the structural anomalies and industrial calculations vanish the exact millisecond the referee blows the final whistle. Long after the digital noise of social media controversies, WADA suspensions, and multi-million-dollar transfer sagas has faded from the internet trends, the emotional weight of a single, definitive tournament goal remains permanently etched into the folklore of a nation. We remember these men not as line items on a corporate balance sheet, but as ordinary mortals who stepped into the blinding spotlight and achieved a moment of sporting eternity that no data model could ever predict. Every legend has a story the highlights never show, a hidden trajectory of sacrifice, political pressure, and intense psychological warfare that defines the true cost of global glory. It reminds us that behind every luxury asset portfolio and every automated press on the grass is a human heart that once ran itself to absolute, physical collapse just to make a stadium scream. If you want to look past the superficial 5-minute highlight reels and truly understand the brutal corporate mechanics operating behind the beautiful game, if you want to deselect the sterile broadcast filters and unlock the deep financial tracks, boardroom betrayals, and systemic collapses that shape international football, make sure to smash that like button right away, subscribe to the channel, and leave your theories in the comments below. Turn on your post notifications so you never miss an execution of our deep investigative blocks, because the vault of international sports business is saturated with thousands of untold stories waiting to be unsealed. We are here to tell those stories the exact way they deserve to be told, with the context, the drama, and the clinical details that mainstream sports networks systematically skip. In our upcoming documentary block, we are shifting our analytical focus directly into the high-intensity theater of club football, exposing a radical, secret boardroom operation that took place during the winter transfer window. A multi-layered conspiracy where a single midnight phone call between an aggressive private equity partner and a prominent agent completely paralyzed the competitive structure of a European powerhouse overnight, leaving 3 world-class superstars permanently locked out. A first team training for the remainder of their contract cycles. See you next time on the Football Archive. Bye.